Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is Georjann Morriseau. Morriseau is a former chief of Fort William First Nation in Northern Ontario and a member of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. She has called her time on the board disheartening and appalling. Morriseau filed a human rights complaint in October 2021 against members of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board, the Chief of Police, and senior management. High-ranking members of the police service are the focus of a criminal investigation by the Ontario Provincial Police. The Ontario Police Watchdog recently appointed an administrator to oversee the board. That led to the majority of the board resigning in late April. Georjann, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you taking some time for us. Let's start with how you ended up becoming a member of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board.
I knew that there was a lot of work that had to be done. It was somewhat of a tumultuous time, coming out of the report and the inquest and so forth, and having an administrator in place and not a fully operational board. So taking those factors into consideration, I thought, given the time and the work that needed to be done, I felt I had that, the qualification to at least be able to start tackling some of the issues. And so I agreed to put my name forward and, was appointed by City Council, and, I made the decision with an open mind.
What were some of the things you were hoping to bring to the board?
Well, I think first off, given my background, and my heritage and life experience, as a First Nation person and woman, I thought being able to bring that perspective and that, that qualified but informed perspective on, Indigenous issues. A lot of these reports centered around that, right? The whole systemic racism piece and so forth. And
you went on to also become board chair for a while.
Yes.
I guess, how did things go at first, and when did things take a turn?
It was going well. I had the support at the time. But I would say it wasn't too long after. Of course, we were entering into bargaining year. I mean, lots going on at the time, right? We have the administrator that's overseeing the board, where there's, the recommendations that we're still needing to look after and plan around. So there was a lot going on at the time, and, but it was through that process, I would say, of, bargaining the collective agreement that things started to become very clear as you start to understand the inner workings of policing and the operational needs, that reflect the community's interest and have a huge impact on those interests, right? Because it's through that process that dictate and govern and guide police officers and civilians, and how policing is carried out in the community. And so, I started to, see things that I was quite frankly not comfortable with. And of course my approach is to ask questions and continue to ask questions, operate through deductive reasoning, trying to really, figure things out, give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But I would say it became it was fairly quick that it became apparent that there was a leadership issue, that a lot of these issues stem from the leadership, both at the board level and at the service level at the highest, right? And so, starting to question and challenge some of these issues and bringing them to the board, promotionals was probably the most contentious issue. And, and there was a series of issues that were happening. There was also political agendas that are competing at the board level and elsewhere. And I mean, it was just so much going on. And so it was around I'd say a few months into my term that things started to get, contentious, I would say, and there was a bit of breakdown, and again, it was because I was bringing things to the board that the board needed to be aware of, right, and that I had a duty and obligation to disclose with the board. We're, as the governing and oversight body, we entrust and task the chief of police and the deputy to oversee and run the operation, right? And, if we as the board aren't fulfilling our mandate and role to direct accordingly or appropriately, then we're at fault just as much. If we're allowing, or even if we're not disallowing, right? Regardless, we're the ones that the buck stops and starts with us, and that was what I was starting to see. But the board, I just didn't seem to be too receptive of that, and it quite quickly became, their animosity started to build between myself and some of the board members, and and things just started to get progressively worse from there.
Georjann, much more to talk about, including your human rights complaint. We just have to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here with Georjann Morriseau on Face to Face. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Georjann Morriseau, a former chief of Fort William First Nation and a board member with the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. And Georjann, we've been talking about things taking a turn for the worse, I guess, in terms of your time with the board. Can you tell us about your human rights complaint and why you had to feel you needed to go down that?
Well, as things got progressively worse at the board level, and it's not for lack of trying. I mean, filing the human rights complaint came as an absolute last resort. That was after exhausting every other, what I felt to be every other possible option of trying to resolve issues at the board and at the service level, right? And so after, during my time as chair, an internal investigation took place. And, part of that was that my personal phone records were, they were sought after through production order, an ITO, right? So I was unaware of this, and this is going back as far as December 2020, sorry. And I was unaware of it, but had been dragged through this process of internal investigation, being, constantly bombarded and harassed and questioned, interrogated, constantly being told I'm just a witness when I had really no role in this internal, and it all stemmed from a text that an officer had received on a phone from a Facebook group, right? And so after a year going through this, it was finally in, I think, February of last year, where I had local OPP officers knock at my door at 9 in the morning, asking me to come to an interview because they were doing an investigation into a breach of trust. And I asked at that time what is it regarding, what is it involving, who, what is my role? They said I'm just a witness, not to worry. Mm-hmm. And I felt I had nothing to hide, I have nothing to worry about, I'll cooperate, as I had all along. But it was after that interview I just felt something, now we have OPP coming, that's a third party, that's an independent jurisdiction. I had to notify the board. So I notified the board. I raised several concerns, over my, dating back to my time as chair, during my time as chair, serious issues that had come to light and serious issues that the board, had many times not taken seriously as they should or acted on. And unfortunately, fast forward to the HRTO and human rights complaint came as a result of the board not acting, the board refusing to act in accordance with procedure, in accordance with PSA, in accordance with our public oath and duties, right, on some of the issues that had been brought forward. I was actively being harassed, targeted. Every board meeting was a nightmare. I was being accused of lying. I was being, accused of not understanding and being incompetent. I had comments made to me by, the secretary and even the current board chair at times where, it was referencing the fact that I'm First Nation from the reserve and that things are done differently out there and not as organized and, how we do it. And I'm like, those are the kinds of comments, but to be called, everything accused of lying and all these things because of my age or because of my heritage, was just, I was beside myself. And, anybody who knows me, or at least anybody who's, at least somewhat familiar with how I operate, I don't use the race card. It's not a fallback mechanism for me because that's not why I joined the board in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's qualification first and foremost. But, these were some of the things that were happening, meetings happening, or secret conversations, whatever was going on that I wasn't aware of, to then find out in writing that there was this criminal investigation into me for breach of trust initiated by the chief of police, who did inform the board secretary, and the board knew and was aware of it going back to December 2020. And that's after asking the board and all its members, including the secretary, whether anybody had been aware of it. Nobody knew. They said, no, we didn't know. To then find out they lied because they did know. It said right in the chief's report herself and in an OPP summary report where it found no criminality. So after that, no justice served, the board not acting, the board not taking any measures or steps to discipline or to address the issue, OCPC not taking any steps or measures to address the issue and operate within their oversight, under their oversight duties, I had no choice but to file a human rights complaint because it's important that everyone understands this issue is not just about me. It's bigger than me. It's I am one board member, but we are talking about upwards of 300 officers and civilians who, there is a community and public expectation for them to serve and protect and do their jobs diligently and effectively and safely and keep the community safe. And, what I was seeing and still continue to see is that in our capacity as, as a board, and even now at the OCPC and provincial level, we are failing miserably because, again, we have, some serious issues. The system is not just broken. The organization, the operations, the people are broken, and these are the very people that we expect to go out and do their jobs effectively by keeping the community safe, including our Indigenous people. And, these were things, and I've said this multiple times, I've pressed multiple times, I've gotten very emotional even multiple times at board meetings to really express this concern that it's a problem. We need to do something and act, and they wouldn't. So I had no choice but to file an HRTO complaint so that one, another independent body can take a look. Two, was that so I can speak. I have the license to speak. The public has a right to know. We don't have a right to keep anything from them that tells us we shouldn't keep it from them. Our oath tells us that, the PSA tells us that, ethics, morals dictate that. Right. And I wasn't seeing that. And so I took that step, and as a result, many others have come forward. And even since coming out and filing an HRTO complaint, still the board refuses to work with me. The board refuses to listen to the officers and the community at large even. We've had Indigenous leaders now come out. Board does nothing, says nothing. Continues to do photo ops, token photo ops, I might add, that aren't indicative of and aren't reflective of the actual environment and what's actually currently going on.
Right. Georjann, much more to try and get to here on the show today. We do just have to step aside for one more quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here with Georjann Morriseau on Face to Face. Stay with us. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Georjann Morriseau, a former chief of the Fort William First Nation and a board member with the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. Georjann, we've seen some correspondence, I guess, that alludes to issues with security and safety for yourself. Do you have concerns about your safety?
I absolutely do. This, like I said earlier, this issue is a lot bigger. I mean, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of different players, and I mean, we're talking about the institution, and we're, for lack of better words, drawing attention back to the head of the snake, if you will, and that's the board. That's the chief, who's still there, and a few others. So. When you start, when you start to push and you start to push the envelope more and more, and you start to see the strains of accountability, it's you never know how people are going to react. And if they were, if individuals were willing within their leadership capacity to leverage that and seek production orders on my phone. And now moving ahead, they got a criminal investigation currently taking place by OPP. You have a OCPC investigation being taken, or being conducted. The stakes are high, and to see how the board and the chief even react and operate, it's concerning, but it's scary. It is scary. I mean, I'm a single mom at home with my kids. And, we're talking about people, who could potentially be held liable and accountable both criminally and or, through code of conduct and under the PSA. And so I don't know what they're capable of. I just know they're capable of doing more heinous things because of what they've already done. And I see how, people are treated and targeted. I see how officers and civilians are treated and targeted. I'm one of those people, and I'm at the board level. Mm-hmm. So I do have fear and concerns about my personal safety. And it's for those reasons, and thankfully with the OPP who has stepped up, from out of town, I might add, independently to offer safety and security supports. And it's necessary, especially when we're dealing with a staff sergeant now who's at the forefront of all of these issues.
Most recently, we've had Anishinaabe Nation and the Anishinaabeg Nation, among others, come out and say that they think that it's time this police service is dismantled. So what are your thoughts on those calls?
So I support those calls. I support the dismantling of the police, the municipal police jurisdiction. I support that. I support what it is that the Indigenous leaders are calling for in the calls to action. I think in addition to that, and where people like myself can offer help and support, is by laying out some of the groundwork. So if we talk about dismantling, what's the alternative? So if the alternative is calling in, say, OPP to come in and oversee, or another jurisdiction, that's one thing, but still there needs to be, the biggest issue is oversight and accountability. So if we have an independent or another jurisdiction overseeing the Thunder Bay Police, if it's to be dismantled, there does still need to be a structure of accountability right from the province downward. That's, to me, is one of the biggest missing pieces in all this. Otherwise, a service or the leadership is being dismantled and replaced with another jurisdiction, right, that once again, once a board's in place, if the province is not going to do their job, right, by holding us and the board accountable to the service and to the community at large, then we might be repeating the same thing we did before, where we had an administrator, the board was dismantled, right? Everybody was knocked out of there, had a new chief, new deputy, everything. Mm-hmm. Here we are, same issue, if not worse this time.
Lots going on. Like you say, there's an OPP criminal investigation underway. There's an Ontario Civilian Police Commission investigation underway. All the human rights things going on. The dozens of cases that need to be reinvestigated, most of them involving Indigenous people.
That's right.
Should Indigenous people in this city have faith in this police service?
As long as the existing leadership's in place, I would have a very hard time sitting here saying that even the community should have trust in the service. I think the trust could be there with, new leadership, and if there was more accountability in place. But right now, as it stands, I don't even trust the service, and I sit there. How can I go out there and say, hey, I don't trust it, but you can? Mm-hmm. No, if we're just going to put these reinvestigations, and community safety in general back into the hands of the very people who broke it, then why would we trust it? It makes no sense to me. I don't want to see that happen again. I don't think this board, the current makeup of this board and the existing leadership, which means the chief of police on the administrative side and her lawyer, though that across the map needs to be changed. Now it needs to be completely overturned. Everybody needs to go. Everybody needs to go before we can have any kind of faith. But there has to be a good plan moving forward as well, because you can't just replace one with another and not know what to do with that.
Right. Well, like we said, lots on the go, lots to watch for in the coming months. Georjann, appreciate you taking some time to be with us this week on the show.
Well, thank you for having me and taking the time to have this conversation with me.
And that is all the time we have for this week. You can catch up on any episodes you may have missed by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca/face-to-face. You can also find this episode and all of our other episodes as podcasts at the same website. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us this week. We'll see you back here on Face to Face next Tuesday.